I spent a lot of time home alone at my parents' house when I was 21. The pond from our backyard was a very small one, a small town park over the other side of the pond. Our nearest neighbors were a slightly spaced out. It was an upscale, pricier block on the edge of town, so it was all pretty expansive. I am fully moved out now, but I was going to school still back then. Then, my parents made a ton of money and had multiple houses, so most of the time I was home alone. A late summer, senseless evening. I was on an all-about, off from school day, so I have no clue if it was a weekend or a weekday, but me getting home by 12 p.m., more than likely, it's some random weekday since I was there. I was in the TV room out back, watching something. In the summer, it was my favorite room in the house to sleep because it's so snug and gets such an excellent draft with all the windows open. I sat on the edge of the couch closest to the corner window, and while there I heard something splashing outside, as if in the pond. A goose, or perhaps even a duck. He and my sister used to fight in water often. They made all kinds of splashing commotion over the summer, so I initially didn't pay attention. But after a minute I started hearing it again, so I turned down the volume on my show, and then listened. I was actually sticking my ear to the window, and I could hear a steady splashing sounds. Big, heavy, too big for a duck to be carrying around. They sounded like human splashes. I opened the door to sunroom and went onto the deck. I glanced through the inky backyard to the blackened hole where, and this was me, they would have cooked fruit and killed squirrels and mice 100 years ago, on trash day. Now I could also hear the humming of a man beneath splashes. Somebody was swimming for sure in the water. They were on my land. The pond was divided into sections among the houses that were located around it. I danced inside for an instant to turn on the deck lights. Using some water, I uncovered what I had just found, a sliver in the rim of the pond, and all of a sudden little splashes and hums ceased. Somebody saw me from up there for sure. I thought it was one of the neighbors going for a swim or something, which also seemed strange because no one had ever really swam in the pond. To be truthful, though a neighbor or not, I was going to never confront that wild being. I walked back in and turned the lights off, obviously, locking the door as well. I texted my brother, who was away at college, about it. He didn't answer right away. I was trying not to creep myself out over it, but watching TV after this was kind of hard. I couldn't focus on the show. I looked out the window, but all I could see outside was darkness. I still had the TV on in the background, not realizing how revealing the light from the TV would be outside. Then I thought I heard something on the deck. I hurried to find the remote and turn off the TV. As the room went black and silent, it took me a few seconds to adjust, and I realized there was the sound of someone's heavy breathing right outside one of the many windows in the room. I instantly laid down flat on the couch to try and hide myself, and after a short moment of silence, a deep voice from outside the window said, "I see you." My heart dropped into my stomach. I couldn't decide in the moment whether to speak or keep hiding, so I just blurted out, "Paul, is that you?" Paul was the name of one of our neighbors. I said this clinging on to the hope that maybe it was him, and he was just messing with me. But the man outside didn't respond to this. I just heard footsteps walking away. As the barefoot-sounding footsteps faded to silence, I still laid flat on the couch, too afraid to move. I laid for a few minutes before the thought to go check that all the doors were locked came to mind. I exploded off the couch and ran straight for the front door. It was locked, as was the side entrance door. After a little while longer and texting my entire family about what was going on, my dad told me to turn the backyard lights on and check if anyone was still out there. He basically told me to be the man of the house and protect it, so I listened and checked the back deck through the window. It was clear. I walked out on the deck with a large knife and gazed downward. There were wet, half-dried footprints from, clearly, bare feet. When I went back out to the side of the deck, following the trail of footprints, it was like something plucked right from a nightmare. Someone's head was at the topmost part of the edge of deck from below, only eyes and forehead visible just over it, ogling at me as though he had heard me coming and waited for. He looked away as we made eye contact. At this stage, I was ready to dial 911. I did it without first informing my parents. taking shelter inside and waiting for them to come. As soon as they arrived, I felt so much better. We were asked if any one of our family members have issues with others. Are there people who don't like us, whether we have some problem neighbor, etc.? Questions like this. They made sure to clear the property quickly and got out of there. I was so nervous that night that I went to bed and closed every window in the house, then turned on my air conditioner as well, just to be even more safe. I was so ridiculously happy to see sunlight the next morning. I doubt that man never returned to our house, and we still question who it is. My dog walks 3 times a day, in the morning, after lunch, and then at night. Each time I take him, I drive down our driveway exit into a cul-de-sac parking lot that services the condominium complex we live in. I know, this is going to be relevant in a minute. The night walk, I always do it a little late. I do not know why, but it has been a ritual for me since the day I got him, and it's never been an issue between the two of us until that one night ago. I started out on our last walk of the day, and we took our usual path. I took a flashlight with me because the parking lot is so dark, and one of my AirPods in, because I thought it would be better to hear anything unusual. And I did. But as I approached the parking lot, I heard something, a voice of some sorts that was happening up ahead of me, but I completely zoned out in my own little music-filled world. Then my brain finally kicked in, and I halted. I pulled the AirPod out and stopped to listen, just in case me hearing things. And again, a voice said in front of me, but I saw nobody. I walked carefully on, convinced it was all in my head. But this just didn't sit well with me. I walked just a few yards, stopped right by all the car park before flashing my flashlight around in front of me again. I kept on listening, and the creepiest thing that has ever happened to me yet is when I heard a voice. It sounded like a child, say help, but it was muffled. I was so heartbroken my legs would not even support me. I whipped my flashlight around wildly, trying to locate the source of it. I was convinced it came from the cars, but this completely messed up my thoughts. But there was no child in sight, or any other people, because there was only me and my dog, who didn't give any indication of anything unusual happening because he was too busy sniffing at some bushes nearby. Then I heard it again. Help, 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 peep. Now it was from my left, where all the cars are. It made me panic even more. I was confused, so I looked at my dog, who also had his ears perked up and looking in the same direction right after it happened. I then realized how weird all of this had to be. I recognized the voice was not quite a child's after I heard it a couple more times. It was a mashup of an adult and childlike expression. I don't know how else to put it. Whenever they screamed for help, not only was it said in a more temperate text-to-speech that used just a generic warning instead of asking somebody to actually contact the police. Not once. And when I say that not once does the tone, inflection, ridling sound come other than exactly as it was written, set horizontal group. And then my dog took me straight home. I explained my mom about what happened. She was as mystified as anyone, and I remarked we ought to dial 911 on the remote possibility that there truly was someone who might require help. But she felt it was unnecessary. So many questions began swirling around in my brain. Why was the voice muffled? Did someone else unseen sit in the car? Or was there something else there in the shadows, waiting for me to come closer? I do not want to dwell on it too much, but whatever it was, I am still very uneasy to this day. This is the spot where I took off my AirPods to listen, and heard it like that, up ahead on the left. This was roughly where I had driven closer and heard it to the left. I know you think it's a condo complex, where was the right all of the noise, but in this way towards your car is where my dog and I heard it. From this perspective, you can understand how there's nothing to tell you, a sound is elsewhere. The cars that were parked at the time were also quite larger, truck types, so they take up more space and harder to see where I was from. I never figured this out,